We acknowledge the lives lost to suicide and recognise those who have survived suicide attempts and those who struggle today or in the past with thoughts of suicide, mental health issues, and crisis situations. We acknowledge all those who have felt the deep impact of suicide, including those who love, care, and support people experiencing suicidality and those experiencing the pain and bereavement through suicide. We respect collaboration with people who have a lived or living experience of suicide and mental health issues and value their contribution to the work we do.
I love and care for somebody who is having those thoughts. I know that they love and care for me. The people around you, like your friends and your family, they want to help you. They're there to listen to you.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope, a series that shares the stories of everyday Australians that have experienced moments in crisis and found a path to support. Whilst all of the stories shared offer hope and inspiration, at times you may hear something you find triggering. If you or someone you know needs crisis support, please phone Lifeline on 13 11 14, text 0477 13 11 14, or visit lifeline.org.au for Lifeline chat service, which is 24/7.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope. I'm your host, Ruben McKellar. Today we are joined by Will, a 29-year-old electrician. Growing up in Eltham, a town northeast of Melbourne, Will had a fairly standard childhood. However, beneath the surface of normalcy lay a profound struggle that began at a young age. At just 5 years old, Will's life was touched by tragedy when his cousin took his own life. This event, coupled with a lack of positive emotional role models in his life, led Will down a path where thoughts of suicide became familiar, almost normalised, responses to emotional distress. In this conversation, Will shares about reaching out to Lifeline during moments of despair, the challenges of navigating relationships, and the stigma surrounding men's mental health. Join us as we delve into Will's journey of resilience, self-discovery, and the ongoing pursuit of mental well-being in a world where seeking help is a sign of strength. Hi, Will. Thank you for joining us today on the Holding On to Hope podcast.
G'day, Ruben.
Your awareness of suicide started at a very young age with the loss of your cousin. Can you tell us about this time and how it began to normalise the idea of suicide for you?
So my awareness of suicide started when I was 5 years old. My cousin, he took his own life. I don't really have any particular memories except for two that stand out. One was my father being particularly upset when we found out the news, and also my aunties and relatives being visibly sick at the funeral, considering he had an open casket. I suppose, suicide isn't something that is normalised for a 5-year-old. It's definitely not something that maybe they can really grasp, but I recall the details being shared with me at the time, instead of it being shared as just, someone has passed away. The details were shared with me, and I think that's really when it stuck. And I got the idea that, when things become overwhelming in life, whatever it might be, that's an option. That as a 5-year-old, that's not really something that's normal, I suppose, in a 5-year-old's life, really. I remember almost immediately finding out that it was suicide and that he'd passed away in that way. Yeah, I think I rationalised in my own head. I don't think there was a particular conversation where it was explained to me the idea of what suicide is. I know he had served time in the Australian Defence Force, and I think I just started to make those conclusions myself at age 5 that maybe things got a bit too hard, and that's why he did what he did. But I don't recall, a particular conversation explaining what suicide meant. I came to those conclusions myself.
Will, can you paint a picture of what was going on in your world when you first became aware of your suicidal thoughts and feelings?
Two things come to mind, really. I think it's a bit retrospective. At the time, it was so normalised that the idea that, if things become too challenging in somebody's world, that suicide is an option. And I think because it was so normalised at the time, it didn't occur to me in the moment that I was having those thoughts myself. I think it's really a retrospective thing that I can think back now and realise that was something that I carried with me and have carried with me my whole life. The first occasion where it stood out to me that, those thoughts, of suicide weren't something that most people thought about was when I was 18. So, a long time after I first heard of the idea. And I remember being overwhelmed or distressed by something and telling my girlfriend at the time that I felt like killing myself. And obviously she was quite upset by that, by hearing her boyfriend say that. But to me, I felt a bit odd that she had such a reaction, because to me it was something just so normal.
You mentioned the conversation with your girlfriend, but could you expand on sort of, what it was like for you having those thoughts and feelings at the time? It
was kind of my default thoughts of suicide. Whenever, I played basketball a lot when I was a kid, and if I didn't perform well in a match, I would that would be my first thought, that I shouldn't be here anymore. So it was certainly a default. Any sadness, feeling stressed or overwhelmed with school, that was the default, that I wasn't good enough and that I didn't need to be here anymore. There was no point of being here anymore. I think, retrospectively now, thinking everything was just kind of dull, really. I didn't feel emotions fully. Everything was just kind of dull, and that was always there in the background.
Could you share how these feelings of suicidality affected your relationships, work, or other aspects of your everyday routine?
I guess what I've alluded to so far is that a lot of my interpretation of it all is hindsight. Because at the time it was so normal to me, I don't think I realised what the effects were. But thinking back now, being so subdued, I think in my emotional experience impacted, every aspect of my life. Really to the point where I would kind of give up with things. As soon as I felt like I wasn't good enough or wasn't performing and those thoughts of suicide took over, I kind of shut down. Obviously being emotionally available to partners, that disappeared. Because I was kind of just trapped in my own thoughts. At work, it did get to the point that I just didn't want to go to work. I'd call sickies and things because I just couldn't cope with the idea of being at work, or I couldn't concentrate because the thoughts of suicide were so overwhelming. Yeah, but like I said, that's all hindsight now that I've been able to take a bit more control of my mental health, mental well-being.
Did you feel at the time you had good avenues to open up about your suicidal thoughts or suicidality?
I don't think I felt at the time that I had anyone to turn to or anywhere to go. I certainly felt the stigma associated with men portraying, a tough exterior. I was just starting at age 20 now, just starting to get in the construction industry, and I think that adds an additional element of, bravado, where men have to have a tough exterior. And I think I was trying to maybe put that on a little bit. So that, it was only my own pressure, but that certainly added to things that, I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go. I think seeing my first girlfriend's emotional reaction kind of made me realize that, she obviously did care about me. But I don't think it was something that I really wanted to talk about.
Will, at what point did you realise that you needed support for your suicidal thoughts and feelings?
At age 21 was when things started to get a bit more overwhelming as far as my suicidal thoughts are concerned. It was really the first time that I called Lifeline that I realised that something was happening that was beyond my control. Prior to that age, I felt like it was normal and it was just something that just happened. I didn't feel like it had too much of an impact on my life. Age 2021, I was moving into the construction industry, like I said, and that's where I guess the pressures of becoming an adult and getting into the professional workforce became a little bit too overwhelming, I suppose. I would leave my desk and go to the bathroom and just sit there because I couldn't cope with what was happening in my head. And so when I completely broke down in the kitchen at home, I was working in a remote town at the time, and there was nobody there with me, and my emotions completely got the better of me and completely overwhelmed me. I felt stunned. I couldn't do anything, and that's where it was the first time that I called Lifeline, because I felt like they were the only person that would maybe understand or listen. I didn't feel like there was anybody else that I could turn to.
Well, can you tell us a bit about what led you to call Lifeline both times, and what was your experience like?
I was working in Katherine, which is a remote part of the Northern Territory, on a construction project there. And I was living with one of my colleagues in a sort of work-provided share house, I suppose, and he'd gone home for the weekend. And so I was there by myself. I remember one night I'd cooked dinner and had dinner, and I remember washing the dishes and feeling so hopeless. And I remember crying, uncontrollably crying, and it was probably something that I didn't do particularly often, so it stood out to me as being a bit unusual. And I remember having just thoughts of particularly my mother, what would she think of me if she was a fly on the wall? What would she think of her son feeling hopeless? And that really set me off, I think, as far as just not being able to control my emotions. And so I called Lifeline. It certainly calmed things down, and that was kind of, really the first experience. The second experience, I was prompted to call Lifeline by a girlfriend at the time. She encouraged me to do so, I think, because she also felt quite overwhelmed by the situation. I remember that conversation also bringing, obviously, comfort to my girlfriend at the time, because I was becoming a bit more relaxed, and that made her feel more relaxed. So it was a really positive experience.
We hope you're enjoying this episode. Lifeline's new support toolkit makes it easier to care for family, friends, and loved ones, and look after yourself along the way. Visit us at toolkit.lifeline.org.au. Now, back to the episode.
What would you say was your biggest hurdle or challenge in taking that critical first step towards getting help?
It's hard to say what the biggest one was, but the two that come to mind, one is the stigma. Like I mentioned, working in the construction industry, we all think that we're invincible and that we need to be invincible. And so I definitely felt the pressure that I shouldn't reach out, for help if I need it. And the other hurdle was obviously not feeling like that I had somebody to talk to. I didn't feel like, there was a particular friend to lean on or a family member. Those were the two, biggest hurdles that I found in reaching out.
Will, how did you go about finding the support you needed when dealing with suicidality, and what resources or methods were most beneficial for you?
Well, the first resource was to go and see a psychologist. That was prompted through the same girlfriend that I had at the time when we shared the Lifeline call, I suppose you could say. She felt like she couldn't be the solution, and I felt like that's not her responsibility either. And so she said, you need to go and see somebody. And so, I called up, or went to the GP and got a referral for a psychologist. And that was probably the most impactful resource that I've had in my mental health journey, mainly because I think it was really my emotional education, which, started when I was 25, 26 years old. It was almost like relearning, what does this mean? What does happiness mean? What does sadness? What does that look like? What does that feel like? I could learn to identify the emotions, and in that way they didn't become so overwhelming.
Did you feel that you could be open with work about what you were going through? It was still very much your own journey. How was that like?
I still felt like it was a very taboo topic at the time. I was really embarrassed actually to go and see a psychologist. I remember I would purposely pick the latest appointment that she had so that it was dark at the time, for the main reason that I didn't want to be seen walking into the psychologist's clinic. I remember parking my car blocks away and walking for the same reason. I didn't want my car to be seen in front of the psychologist's office. I don't think I really disclosed any of that until a few years later, to an employer anyway.
What specific actions did you implement or even habits did you develop to cope with suicidal thoughts or emotions?
I remember the first kind of strategy that my psychologist asked me to implement was setting a timer on my watch for every hour to stop for 30 seconds and take deep breaths. That was the first thing. I was kind of a bit skeptical at first. I'd never done breathing exercises or meditation of any kind, but it certainly helped. I was in the middle of a day. At the time, I was running a small crew on the construction site, and it helped just for stress management. And I could see the immediate effects of helping me, at that exact moment where I took a 30-second break and did some deep breathing. And then, I slowly started to see the benefits from a broader sense, in that by eliminating or putting out spot fires, I suppose, at the time, that would help in a broader sense. These days, it's almost moments of kind of old man contemplation that really help with my mental health. I like to reflect on how my days go, or really reflect on my behavior with a particular stimulus. I like to reflect after the moment and think, well, why did I behave that way? Or why did that impact me in a certain way? And exercise too is a massive thing. Starting your day with exercise, gives me a sense of kind of completion for the day. I've done what I need to do for myself, and the rest is a bonus kind of thing after that.
Well, looking back at your journey, what are some valuable insights or lessons you've learned about yourself and your mental health?
Yeah, I think a big insight that I've learned is that I'm a bit more fragile than the persona that I've tried to put on for most of my life, as being invincible and I guess falling into the stigma that men don't need help or they shouldn't need help. And I become okay with that. If I need more rest, I take more rest. If I need more sleep, then I take more sleep. If whatever it might be, I think being a bit more accommodating to what I actually need versus what I think I should need. That's definitely something that's been big for me. And I think kind of, that emotional awakening or relearning all of my emotions at a later, quarter life crisis kind of thing, relearning my emotions, that was a very valuable lesson, because it enabled me to feel them more because I knew what they were, but also helped me to manage them because I knew what they were for the same reason. They kind of lost the more negative emotions. Not to say that they're not valuable too, but they didn't become so overwhelming. I knew what they were. I could listen to them, and if it's something like fear, I could realize why I was feeling that, and maybe it was a fearful situation, and I needed to get out of there or whatever it was. But that's probably been the most valuable lesson, is relearning the bare basics of what emotions are and what they feel like.
Will, how are you doing now? And have you gained a better understanding of your triggers for suicidal thoughts?
I'm fairly realistic with my own mental health journey, and realize that going to see a psychologist once isn't going to fix me for the rest of my life. So, I'm okay with it being an ongoing journey, and there's obviously ups and downs that come with that. But overall, I'm much better. And I say that mainly because now I know about it, I can do something about it. In the past, it was just so normalised that suicide ideation was there in the background. It was something that I thought about all the time. But now that I'm aware of how it impacts my life and impacts relationships and work and everything else that I do, I'm all the better for knowing I think there's probably a bit of a cycle that my friends have seen in my exercise regime. When I feel like things aren't going so well, I kind of ramp that up, and that becomes a bit more of a focus in my life. And then when things are good, I'm probably eating a bit too much, more than I should be, and not exercising as much. But even just smaller strategies like spending time doing a bit more things that I would consider wholesome, like reading a book and those kinds of things, instead of spending time on technology. That really helps to ground me, I guess, and bring me more in touch with the way that I'm feeling and what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So definitely a lot better than I used to be.
What would be your message of hope for someone listening who is currently struggling?
My message of hope would be that the people around you really do care about you. I guess I have the perspective of being bereaved by suicide, as well as intense suicide ideation, and the experience of being bereaved by suicide, as well as having intense suicide ideation myself. And the way that I've love and care for somebody who is having those thoughts is the same way that I know that they love and care for me. And if you are going through some difficulties or struggling, the people around you, like your friends and your family, they want to help you. They're there to listen to you, and they really do love and care for you. And, take that as encouragement to seek the support that you need. There's no shame. There's no embarrassment. I've only had positive experiences myself when I've opened up to friends and family. So, reach out to somebody you trust and someone you love, and you'll be supported and loved by them.
Thanks, Will, and thank you so much for joining us and holding on to hope.
My pleasure.
It's really good to hear your story.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Holding On to Hope, the podcast. Lifeline is grateful to all Holding On to Hope participants for choosing to share their personal lived experiences openly and courageously in order to offer hope and inspiration to others. Your act of kindness makes for a better world. And remember, you don't have to struggle alone. Visit toolkit.lifeline.org.au today.